After breakfast, when they returned to the cell, Zakhar shut the door behind them, leaning against it with an amused expression. "You're mine now, Lucas," he murmured, his voice dipping lower. "You knew that the moment you crawled into my bed." Lucas swallowed hard, feeling the space between them shrink. Zakhar was so much bigger, so much more than he could handle. But the heat in those golden eyes told him it didn't matter. He'd made his choice. The air in the cell was thick, charged with something Lucas wasn't sure he was ready to name. The door had barely clicked shut before Zakhar moved, stepping forward, his towering presence swallowing the space between them. Lucas's breath hitched as his back hit the wall, the cool concrete pressing against his thin prison uniform. Zakhar wasn't touching him, not yet, but the heat of his body, the sheer size of him, made Lucas feel like he was being pinned by presence alone. Golden eyes burned into him, unreadable yet intense, the slow curl of a smirk tugging at Zakhar's lips. "You looked real pretty this morning, doll," he murmured, voice like gravel and dark promises. "Walking beside me like you belong there." Lucas swallowed hard, his throat dry. I do, don't I?" Zakhar tilted his head, watching him like a predator toying with its prey. You do, but I wonder." His hand finally moved, slow and deliberate, reaching up to brush a calloused thumb against Lucas's jaw. It was barely a touch, but it sent a shiver down Lucas's spine. "Do you know what you belong to?" Lucas's breath stuttered. He knew the answer Zakhar wanted. He knew what this was, a test, a game, a dance he couldn't escape. And yet, despite the fear coiling in his gut, there was something else, something deeper thrumming beneath his skin. "I belong to you," he whispered, barely audible. Zakhar's smirk widened. "That's right, doll." The hand on his jaw moved, fingers tracing the delicate lines of his face, brushing over the sharp cut of his cheekbone, the softness of his lips. Lucas felt caged, but not in the way he had been when he first arrived at this prison. This was something different, something more dangerous. "You're so damn pretty," Zakhar murmured, almost to himself. "Like something out of place in a shithole like this. Like a little angel that fell too far." Lucas's stomach clenched at the words, heat pooling low in his body. Why was he reacting like this? This wasn't fear, not the kind he had known before. This was something else, something that made his skin prickle and his breath quicken. Zakhar's other hand landed on the wall beside Lucas's head, fully caging him in now. He leaned in, his lips brushing against Lucas's ear as he spoke. "Tell me, doll, have you ever been kissed by a monster?" Lucas's heart pounded against his ribs. "No," he admitted, voice barely a breath. Zakhar hummed, the sound deep and approving. "Then I guess it's time you find out." Before Lucas could react, Zakhar closed the last inch of space between them, capturing his lips in a slow, claiming kiss. It was nothing like Lucas expected, nothing rushed, nothing forceful, just deliberate, like Zakhar was tasting him, like he had all the time in the world to explore every inch of his lips. Lucas's fingers curled into fists, unsure whether to push or pull. His mind screamed that this was dangerous, but his body wasn't protesting. It was responding, melting against the warmth, the sheer dominance Zakhar exuded without even trying. Zakhar pulled back slightly, his lips hovering just above Lucas's, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "You taste sweet, doll," he murmured, thumb brushing against Lucas's lower lip. "Like sin wrapped in silk." Lucas sucked in a shaky breath, his pulse a frantic drumbeat in his ears. You shouldn't say things like that." Zakhar chuckled, low and dark. "Why not? Does it make you nervous?" Lucas looked up at him, his blue eyes wide, searching. "Yes?" Zakhar's grin widened, his fingers trailing down Lucas's throat, stopping where his pulse thundered beneath his skin. Good. The cell felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the air charged with something Lucas wasn't ready to name. The silence between them stretched long after the kiss, a thick, unspoken weight lingering in the air. Lucas sat on the lower bunk, his legs tucked beneath him, trying to steady his breathing. His lips still tingled, the taste of Zakhar still there, impossible to ignore. Zakhar, on the other hand, was the picture of ease, leaning against the cell wall with his arms crossed, watching Lucas with those golden eyes that never missed a thing. After a moment, he finally spoke. "Tell me something, doll." Lucas hesitated, wary of the sudden shift in Zakhar's tone. "What?" Zakhar tilted his head, studying him. "How many boyfriends did you have before me?" Lucas blinked. "What?" Zakhar smirked. "You heard me." Heat crept up Lucas's neck. Of all the things he expected Zakhar to say, that was not one of them. "Why do you care?" he asked, avoiding the question. Zakhar pushed off the wall and stepped closer, the air between them shrinking with every step. "Because I want to know," he said simply. "A guy like you, pretty, smart, knows how to play people. You must have had your fair share." Lucas bit the inside of his cheek, unsure how much he wanted to reveal. His past relationships, or the lack thereof, weren't something he liked to think about. But something about Zakhar's gaze made lying feel pointless. "Not many," he admitted, his voice quieter than he intended. Zakhar's brow lifted as if that answer intrigued him. "Not many, huh?" Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I was busy." Zakhar let out a low chuckle and crouched in front of him, resting his massive forearms on his knees. "Busy conning people?" Lucas shot him a glare, but Zakhar's smirk only deepened. "Yeah," Lucas muttered. "That and surviving. Relationships weren't exactly at the top of my priority list." Zakhar hummed, his golden eyes flickering with something unreadable. "So, no real boyfriends? No one special?" Lucas exhaled sharply. "There were a couple." He hesitated, then added, "But it never lasted long." Zakhar studied him for a moment, as if piecing something together. "Because of you? Or because of them?" Lucas flinched. He hated how easily Zakhar saw through him. "Both," he admitted. "I didn't let people in, and the ones who did get close, well, they weren't exactly saints." Zakhar's gaze darkened slightly. "They hurt you?" Lucas shook his head quickly. "Not like that." He hesitated before adding, "They used me. I was useful to them, until I wasn't." Zakhar was silent for a long beat. Then, to Lucas's surprise, he reached out, tracing a finger along Lucas's jaw, tilting his chin up slightly. "That's a damn shame," he murmured. "They didn't know what they had." Lucas swallowed, his pulse quickening. "And you do?" Zakhar smirked. "Oh, I know exactly what I have." The weight of those words sent a shiver through Lucas. This was different. This wasn't some fleeting, temporary arrangement. This was something deeper, something dangerous. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to pull away. The tension from before still lingered. Zakhar's touch burned into his skin like a brand. He hadn't spoken since the man had finally let him up. But now, as Zakhar sat on the bottom bunk, his golden eyes sharp with something calculating, Lucas knew something was coming. Zakhar's smirk was gone. In its place was something else. Something cold and dangerous. "Lucas," Zakhar finally said, his voice quieter than usual. Lucas swallowed. "What?" Zakhar leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I'm getting out of here." Lucas blinked. He stared at Zakhar, waiting for the punchline, the laugh, the smug gotcha. But it never came. Zakhar's face remained unreadable, His eyes locked onto Lucas like he was assessing his every reaction. Lucas let out a breathless chuckle. Yeah? You planning on walking out the front door? Zakhar didn't laugh. Not quite. Something cold settled in Lucas's stomach. Zakhar was serious. You're joking, Lucas said, voice quieter now. Zakhar tilted his head. Do I look like I'm joking? No, he didn't. Lucas took a step back, shaking his head. You can't just escape, Zakhar. This isn't some minimum security facility where you can bribe a guard and slip out. This is a fortress. There are cameras, lockdown protocols, patrol rotations. Zakhar cut him off. And you think I don't know that? His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. A warning. Lucas clamped his mouth shut. He didn't like the way his heart had started racing. Zakhar was unpredictable, but this was suicide. Zakhar leaned back against the wall, watching him. You really think I haven't spent the last 5 years studying every single weak point in this place? Lucas swallowed. A lot of guys in here talk about escape plans, Zakhar. They dream about it, run their mouths, but no one actually does it. Because it's impossible. Zakhar's smirk returned, but it was different this time. It was knowing. Not impossible, he murmured. Just difficult. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. All right, fine. Say you do have a plan. Why the hell are you telling me? Zakhar's eyes gleamed. Because you're coming with me. Lucas froze. What? You heard me, doll. Zakhar's voice was smooth, assured. You and me. We're getting out of here together. Lucas let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Zakhar, I can't. Zakhar's expression darkened. You can and you will. Lucas clenched his jaw. Why me? Zakhar's smirk returned, slow and deliberate. Because you're mine, and I don't leave what's mine behind. Lucas's breath caught, a shiver rolling down his spine. He knew, without a doubt, that Zakhar meant it. Silence stretched between them before Lucas finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Tell me the plan. Zakhar's grin widened. That's my good boy. That's my